the way they hurt me, but I had to get through and tell my story and get my victory and give God the glory. Give God the glory. Yeah, that's what I do. Give God the glory. He already knew my story. Look at me. Look at me tonight. I am so excited. I have Airman Sheila Calvert all the way. Jackson, let me get that straight. Yes, son, Jackson. Let me get that straight. She is here with us tonight all the way from Missouri. And we are so happy and honored to have her with us. She has her own story tonight. Listen, we've been in our series of Survivor. We talking about how we have survived, overcome sexual abuse, molestation. We talk about everything sexual abuse here, but some things, just to recap a little bit, we talked about proven ways to improve your ability to be resourceful. Adaptability, abstinence, aptitude, ability, and action. And truly tonight, I have my own daughter here, and she's going to talk about her survive, her as a survivor. And listen, one of the hardest things for me as a mother is that we do everything that we can to protect our children, to be watchful, to make sure that they grow up healthy. And as hard as parents try to, sometimes there's things that happen, that things that slip through the crack. There's things that we do or other people do. And tonight I just wanted her to tell her own personal story. Oftentimes I get on here and I share with you and I tell my story, but I wait. I never want anyone to feel forced, because everybody get through this process of surviving at a different time in their lives. So tonight she's just going to share some of the things that she did, some of the things that taken place in her life. And we want to say to you that we pray that it encourages you, it enlightens you, it inspires you not to be afraid, not to be ashamed, but get to that place in your life. We know everybody don't want to come on Facebook, but tonight Sheila is bold enough to be here. And like I said, one of the hardest periods of my life is when my daughter came and shared with me about a nephew that I trusted as a son, that I loved as a son, still love him, and allowed him to be a part of our lives. And something got in his head and it affected her directly. And so she's gonna just share a little bit about that tonight. You wanna give us? I just remember that night when you called me. It was like 2 in the morning, and it was really scary for me. Your voice, you were very upset. You were hyperventilating, and I know it was very, very, very hard for my husband as a man to even understand. I remember us jumping out of bed. We didn't have any shoes on our feet. We just heard this distress. You know, it was like 911 right away. And we got to, I told you to stop right where you are, pull over and let us, because I couldn't even imagine you driving in the way that you sounded to me, and pull over. And we came right to you, right where you were. And that's when we heard this very disappointing, very disheartening story, that truth that you had shared with us. So you want to share a little bit?
Yeah, I think giving you guys a little bit of context of how I kind of came out of that situation will just really help just as we progress through tonight, and then how we kind of close out as well, because I know we're going to talk about some other things. But kind of like what she was sharing when I called them late at night, but a little bit before that, during the situation, you know, I was really in shock, in such shock that I just knew I had to get out of there. And I'm sure some of you guys have felt that way in that moment, just feeling like I just have to do whatever I need to do to get out of here. And so I was just really, I pretended to be really confused.
Survivor mode.
Yeah, was in this, yeah, my body, honestly, my mind also went into this moment of like, we need to survive now. And so it wasn't fight, it was just get out of here. And I just remember texting my dad, like, just really like, texting him, like, hey, call me real quick, to kind of distract Reggie. And at that point, he called me, and it was so funny because it was like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or something like that. And of course, if your daughter sends you that text, you're like, why are you asking me to call you? And I'm like on the phone, like super calm, like, yeah, Dad, I'll be home soon. And it's, again, in that moment, you would think that you would just be hysterical. But I guess, again, your body kind of goes in that survival. And I was like, you know what, Dad, I'll be home, because I was trying to, again, make him think that I was being called home at that moment. And so got off the phone, got out of there, in one piece. And that's what mattered in that moment. And got into my car. And that's when all those emotions really rushed in. When I knew that I was safe, and everything came out. And that's when the hyperventilating came, and the overwhelmedness, and the feeling like I don't know what just happened, and actually, I guess in that moment too, all those questions start to happen too. Like, did this happen? What's going on? What's gonna happen now? What's the next step? And I'm just so grateful to have the parents that I had that didn't stop to, like, honestly try to understand the situation. And I think some people tried to, but instead they just were like, we need to make sure our daughter is taken care of. And that's exactly what you guys did that night, which I appreciate so much. Like, there's so many times, because just to give you guys context exactly on kind of what I do during the day. So I am in the Air Force, but I do mental health counseling, work with people with alcohol, drug abuse counseling. So you can imagine I deal with a lot of people that have kind of been through some of those different stories. And honestly, their story is not, a lot of them are not the same. They didn't have people that really just had their back, that they might have had people that questioned them a lot, but not people that just made sure that they were taken care of. And my parents did that, called the cops and everything. And I was in that moment able to feel like, I'm not crazy. And I think a lot of us need that in that first, especially that first initial encounter. And I think that was the start of my journey to victory in the end. So
Wow, wow. And let me say this to you out there. Sheila and I've never forced her to talk about it. I've always waited on her to share her story. And as a parent, as a mother, that was total shock, because this was somebody that I loved, and this was somebody that I trusted. It was like a big brother. You watch this man go from a little boy and to develop into a man, and to becoming something in a moment in time. And it was really tragic. And then to find out later that this has been going on in some of the family for a long period of time. So this is the thing. We must be open-minded and not try to, like Sheila said, try to figure out who and what and where. We just heard her distress. We knew that it was a crime. We knew that it was not right. You don't need to try to figure out things when you know that something is wrong, especially when you had never heard this story from her or him. You had never I've seen a lot of changes as everybody's grown up, but you know and there's a lot that we probably will not say, because we're not here to hurt anybody. We're here to help you. But some of you, the problem is when a sexual predator takes advantage of someone, especially if it's a relative, some of you try to figure it out. You try to get in place, and you try to have all the answers. But me and her father, we didn't have the answers. But we knew our daughter. we had experience. None of us are perfect, but she had never made a distress call like that. She had never hyperventilated like that. And I want to say to anybody, if you weren't there, just trust your parental instincts and just believe what's in your heart. And so the first thing that I did as a mother, I thought it was best to be protective of her. Yes, I became very protective, and I wanted her to get care. So I wish that that evening I should have went straight to the hospital, but I wanted her. I just became protective. I wanted her to be with her, to cover her, and I wanted her to. Um, what did it say? I, we're getting notes from our producers, but they got to write in black. Listen, but I like to keep it real. This is live. We didn't plan this, but let me say, well, we even came with the names things. Listen, the reason we come with the names is because it gives us power back. The thing we've been keeping everything a secret. I understand you don't want to know names. Now, for me, let me say this. So the producer is saying to us, we don't want to name names,
Yeah.
but so we'll try not to. But if it comes out, I'm not losing my power tonight because I was so ashamed to name Saul. I call him Louse. In this book, his name is Louse, but his real name is James Solomon Jr. That's his name. Okay, because I need my power back. But I was so ashamed, so embarrassed.
Yeah.
But that's what the therapist has said to us tonight. And we always want to keep them a secret. But I'm out here. My name is Sheila Coward, and so he's out here too. And so we understand what the producer's saying. He don't want us to get in no
Yeah.
trouble. But
Yeah.
but I can't get in no trouble because he's dead. So
Well, just with the name thing, okay, for the sake of the show, we won't. But I do want you guys to know that if you are talking to people about your situation, that you should use names because a lot of times we'll think that by not saying the name, we feel like, oh, we can't say that because we don't want to make them feel like they've won or anything. But actually, when you do, you actually gain a little bit of victory back every time that you do because that means that person no longer has power over your words. They no longer have power of your story. It's your story. Yeah, that was the person that did what they did to you. So you can absolutely use a name. And so, but for the sake of tonight, we're going to try our best not to. But I have found, just kind of like my mom said recently, just going through, therapy and giving people therapy, that actually it is more therapeutic to actually be able to say the person's name out loud, not in a quiet voice, not in your head, actually saying it so you can start that healing process.
wow, that's now that I didn't know myself because I've always kind of thought we don't want to talk. We don't want to talk. Make it. We don't want to look like we're talking about a person, but
Yeah.
we did not come to these places alone. And we understand that if you are in legal situations, if you are in courtroom situations, then you have
Yeah.
to refrain and hold. But we're not in any courtroom situations. But excuse me, use wisdom in how much you want to say, because otherwise, what would you call them? A beast, a monster, the devil, a pervert? I mean, you can name them some other kind of names, but it's nothing good. And listen. A lot of times, people say, "Well, you've done things," but I'm not talking about what I've done. Right
Right.
now, I'm talking about predators that sexual abuse our children, our sons, our daughters. You need help. But anyway, we want to focus on surviving and what were some of the steps. because you have become such a beautiful, you are such a beautiful woman. And I'm telling you, as a mother, I seen you transition. One thing I seen you deal with, it was a lot of anger at first. Then you cut off all your hair. I was like, oh my God, what do we, am I losing her? And I know some of you parents out there, you don't, you be in shock, and then you wonder, where is my precious girl? Because Sheila was so gentle, she was so easygoing. A lot of times we're so gullible. We're just you're thinking a man got his wife and mama upstairs, they won't do that. But see, my mother was in the front room in her own bed, and the man came and raped me. And so don't be telling people just because their parents are home, their father is home, that this person won't come after you, because they will. And so I'm telling you, it's even hard tonight, but I want to say that you are amazing. But I just wanted to address that I did see her go through a lot of anger. Then I remember she didn't want none of us to touch her. And you were not there, so don't say you, and most of you, those of you that are my relatives, you don't know, because you're really not there. You wasn't part. You probably met Sheila 5 times, and we're blood relatives. But I remember my daughter being so angry. I remember her cutting off all of her hair. I remember we're a very affectionate, touchy, Philly family. She was like, Dad, no, Dad, don't touch me, and that came from something. Where did that come from?
I think in the beginning, um, I think you kind of go through a grief period because you do lose things. You feel like you're losing, number one, the relationship with that person that I honestly
Okay.
felt like was like a brother, and so you're going through whatever those 5 stages of grief are: anger, denial, all those different things. And so it's kind of the same thing, and then you also feel like you kind of lost yourself, and so now you're trying to rediscover that and also trying to understand what just happened. And so for me, it was definitely that, rediscovering, okay, like, who am I really, what did I lose, and what am I supposed to gain from this, but also in trying to understand that. And I think the first thing for me was finding a place where I can actually be open and transparent, because it is such a scary thought, to have to think about those situations. And the first thing that you want to do is really go into yourself. And so a lot of that was me kind of going into myself, like, I'm gonna, cut my hair or just try to please some part of me. And when it comes to not really wanting to be touched, I think it was just not knowing really what connection was. Because again, I thought that person was my brother, and so you're like, okay, well, what are these relationships in my life? If that one was that, now I have to redefine, kind of like, what is a true connection for me. And so, trying to rebuild on that wasn't really. I was never really feeling like I didn't want to be like touched per se because of the situation. I think it was like I just couldn't really connect, with people. I couldn't really connect with my family at that, just at a deeper level because of what I experienced. And so, then you kind of go through that grief period. Okay, like, now I'm no longer that Sheila before that. Now I'm Sheila coming out of this, and again trying to define what that kind of looks like. So.
Well, as a mother, I remember having a therapist come over.
Mhm.
What was the silence about? Because I remember having therapists come over for a little while, and then all of a sudden you didn't want to talk about it anymore. You became very silent. It's like you put this shield up, even
Yeah.
though I knew that you knew that I believed in you,
Yeah.
and that and I think that helped.
Mhm.
But I remember you putting this shield up, and you became very silent.
Yeah. I will say, going through a court process, and here, I hope that you guys hear all this the right way. It was not the most fun thing. It's just not. You are in a situation where people are constantly trying to prove that you something didn't happen,
Judge
versus
you.
yeah, prove that something did happen. And so you're going through that battle, and then you're constantly having to retell your story, right, to a therapist, to the judge, to whoever else, a cop, to, your friends that also probably know about the situation. And then, a lot of times you run into maybe half of those people just don't even believe the story, and you've already kind of been vulnerable and in that place with those people. And so you do get to a little numb because I think it's a protective factor that your body kind of tries to put up, because it's like, okay, we're trying to be open to get this, safety, or get this type of this justice. But I feel injustice because nobody's really listening. And I knew that you guys were, but it still just felt, just kind of going through court. It was very hard. It was very hard dealing with that, seeing his face, seeing my family. That
Because
was just,
they're
yeah,
innocent until proven guilty.
yeah,
And what was hurtful for me, and what was helpful for me at that time, I had support from my church. They knew, they had seen that me and Anthony were honest people. They didn't see us making up stories and
yeah,
having a lot of drama in our church. And my church at that time, they came to our rescue, and not as far as they just believed, and they
right,
believed that we were a good family and that we were not here. And to me, the most hurtful thing was when in this, for me, and this really is not about me, but since I'm here dealing with it right now, it was the rejection of the family
yeah,
who had no participation, who had no truth, who act like they didn't know anything about me. I'm not saying all the family members, but so many of them,
yeah,
they got into this, I'm not choosing sides. We never asked you to choose sides, but you should have stood for what was right. You didn't even come ask me. You didn't even say, well, how are you as a mother? You didn't even, and oftentimes people say, well, they're not dead. Well, they didn't cut her ear off. Well, they didn't kill her. Well, that is not the point. A crime had been there was a crime. We did the best thing, to take it to court and not exchange. Some people go out there and do and take vengeance, and it just go deeper and deeper and deeper. But we're not criminals. We tried to do right, and so I do want to be very. I am very thankful because my church encouraged me as a mother. I was so broken and so hurt. When you see your children break, it breaks something in you, and you want to instantly repair it and recover it, and you want to see them win, and you want to see everybody win. And the hardest thing, even when the police came, I was like, oh, but I love them so much. Then I was
yeah,
like, oh, but I know and the police was like, now look, ma'am, what do you want us to do? Because I wasn't confused by what had happened, by your
right,
truth. I was confused by his behavior and by what he had done. And he hadn't even acknowledged that this is your uncle's daughter,
yeah,
that this is your like your sister. You lived with us, that this is some I loved you. I went places. Me and we worked together. I went to the movies with you. I cared for you. I told him I cared for your child, and he was saying to me, Auntie, please forgive me. I was like, but I kept your baby, but this what you did to my child. And so as a survivor, I want you not to feel bad at how you get
yeah,
through the other side.
yeah. I think that was so huge, just what you were saying. If it had a truly probably been my choice that night, I probably wouldn't have gone to the cops, because, like she said, like I felt honestly, a lot of my instincts when I found out that that was the situation, I was just like, but he has a family, and that's so crazy, because you would think again, like, well, why would you care? Because again, we had a relationship. That doesn't mean that because of that situation, now all of that goes out the window, and so your heart is still in that. And I think, like she said, having actual people like our church and different people that really supported us was so important, because it's like, well, what do we really have to gain in this? We lost a relationship that was important, that felt like it was important, and now because of this, like, it had to pretty much be cut. And we felt, and for me again, like, I felt like people were making me feel wrong about that. Like, that is, like, why couldn't we, keep it in the family or do all these different things? But it's just like, that's not, like you said, it's a crime. If it was any other crime, we would go to the authorities, and that's exactly what you're supposed to do. And if anybody's telling you different, or even if you feel different about that, like, it is a crime, and you were injustice in that, and you need to go seek that out, because it does, even though, like I said, it was hard. I think that if I hadn't have had that, it would have been a lot harder to even be in the place that I am now, to be able to openly tell my story to even my close family members. And it was hurtful when there were some family members that didn't really want to hear what I had to say. They just kind of really, they said they didn't want to pick sides, but that is picking a side. You know, you, whatever you permit, you promote. If you allow something and you don't even actually like take a stand, then what you're saying is that you are taking a stand by not taking one. And so, even in that, like if you have friends, it's not saying that you have to absolutely believe everything a person is saying, but why not at least, like you said, check on that person or see what there is that you could actually do? Because there isn't anything you can do other than maybe provide support. And again, support is not always just being like, wow, that person's horrible. Sometimes it's just making that person feel like, well, I know you, and I know that that would not be your choice situation to have been in, right? So, so yeah.
Well, I think oftentimes too, Sheila, as I tell you all here on Why Should I Be Ashamed, that oftentimes it has happened to them.
Yeah.
And in some of our families, it's been a secret so long. And then when they see someone that finally say, hey, we're not going to allow this. This is not okay. We don't approve of this, in a different way than covering up, because so much has been covered up under the rug in all walks of life. You know, in the hospital, that's why you have lawyers, and that's why we have authorities to bring order. And but a lot in sexual abuse, oftentimes there is no order, there is no answers, and people do not know what to say. And you know, a lot of times people that rape people and do some real some other tragic things to them, the first thing they tell them, you bet not tell. And I think that is the voice of the perpetrator. You bet not tell, you bet not say anything, you know you're telling a lie. And so many times that's in our atmosphere. But what we're saying tonight is that your story is your story, your truth is your truth. Stand on it. And I always say everybody's not going to get on Facebook. Why do we do this? Because somebody needs help tonight. And so many has come to us in our messenger, in private conversation, and told me, Sheila, thank you so much for being our voice, for now allowing me. I'm 60 years old and now I can speak. I'm 70 years old. They never knew why they didn't have good, healthy life, good, healthy marriages, good, healthy relationships, because they buried the anger or they're displayed the anger somewhere else. And so there's many survivors out here, and I never, ever wanted to hear this story from my family, and but I know it happens, and it has happened, and so we move forward. So how did you move forward, Sheila? And just, I mean, even when you joined the Air Force, I didn't know if you were running away because you had spent the time in college. You were going to become a doctor, and all these roads began to change, and I'm so glad that you didn't allow sexual abuse to just take you off your total destiny of what of all the opportunities that you have, and all the gifts and talents and the beauty that you have. You have a wonderful marriage. I remember the wedding. It was so beautiful. You have great friends. You have great relationship. Now here that you're going to castles and you're doing just all these amazing travels. And how did you move forward when I thought you were running away? But I took my hands off as long as I knew she was making good decisions. I just had to just say, she's an adult now. She's gonna get through this.
Yeah, that's a lot of that I can answer for sure. Kind of, well, after the court stuff, I don't think I could really start really moving forward until everything was 100% done, because it was almost like you were reliving that moment. And then finally, yeah, I did kind of join the military, to kind of run away, but I always knew I was going to join the military. I remember we had the conversation years before I did. I was actually going to join a lot later in life. The plan was for me to finish college and go into the military to become a doctor. I was just like, I'm just gonna go now because I needed to get away from here. You know, I was just in that space where I needed something different. I needed a change, but I also knew it wasn't just a random decision. It was actually a area in my life that I was planning on going in anyway. Um, Joined the military. I ended up stationed out in Missouri, which never thought I would end up there. I actually fought tooth and nail not to go there. Almost ended up back in North Carolina. That's a whole nother story, but God literally, He placed me in Missouri absolutely for a reason. I literally met my now husband a week after I got there, and he's just insanely the most encouraging, kindest, loving, so strong, so headstrong of a person that I never really thought that I would ever meet. And I think when I met him, just seeing the way that he respected me, and I also made a choice very early on when we met that I was not going to carry my past into that relationship. And I was very honest with him about that. You know, I didn't tell him everything that happened to me because I think that there's a time and place for you to start talking about certain things with your significant other. Um, but, you know, um, but I also knew that I just didn't want to carry that into that because it wasn't fair to him. And so we met, and yeah, I still had a lot of healing to do. But I was kind of scared too because you feel like you have to be this whole entire healed person before you get married. I don't believe that's entirely true. I do believe that you should do some work on yourself. You should have a certain level of love for yourself before you kind of take that next step into a relationship. But I think when I opened up my heart to him, to actually eventually trust after knowing him for some time and also having people in our life that could speak into our life, and I saw that he wasn't, you know, the type of man that just thought that he knew everything, right? And so after I actually did that and also worked on myself too, I was able to start taking some different um, ways to actually change. I will say, you know, once I started kind of working my career in the Air Force, you know, it did get to be a lot because I heard a lot of my same story from other people. I
Mm.
wasn't truly processing what happened to me because I still didn't really know what that looked like. So I was kind of dealing with the things that they were dealing with and bringing that back home, you know, and that was really hurtful. And then there was a point in my life actually earlier this year, um, around April, I got into a car accident, and you know that actually was pretty traumatic. And after that car accident, that was actually when a lot of the feelings from the previous sexual assault and like other things that had happened to my in my life that were pretty traumatic kind of came up. Different feelings started to come up, and it was crazy because I was like, I thought I had dealt with that stuff. And then I realized that I hadn't. I kind of just like stuffed it down and tried to just move on with my life. And here's the thing about trauma or anything that you go through, it will come back up or it will show up in other areas of your life. And so I ended up, you know, going to therapy, speaking to somebody about not just about the car accident because it wasn't about the car accident. It was about all the things that piled up, and then that one like thing that kind of tipped the bucket over. That last drop of water that kind of tipped the bucket over was like, okay, like you actually need to talk about this stuff and talk about it right. Um, and so really now I've truly gotten to the place where I truly feel like I've had so much victory in that area of my life. And I think it's because you know, just those different things in life. And yeah, I've made some different choices now. I'm on a different path as far as like just really wanting to be more intentional about what God truly has for me and my husband and the direction that he's taking our family. But I 100% believe like every step that I've taken was God ordained. You know, did I want that situation to happen that night? No. But if it hadn't, I don't even know if I'd even be where I'm at today. And I'm so thankful for where I'm at. My life is like so beautiful, like you said. Like just you know, when I walk into the castle that I went to a couple weeks ago, like you just kind of think like, what did I do to ever to deserve this, you know, and it just is proof that God is a restorer and he restores everything.
He
But
gives
you
you
have,
beauty
he
for
does.
ashes, for
Yeah.
things that are
Hmm.
broken. He gives you beauty for ashes. The most hurting thing for me, of course, is to see you. But the blessing is that you're so strong and you're
Hmm.
so beautiful, and that I always wanted a family. And when we look at where we are, so and you have a huge family,
Yeah.
but there's such a disconnection
Hmm.
because of this one ugly thing. and
Hmm.
and that's what I hate for all of you out there,
Hmm.
that sometimes this brokenness and the men in our family,
Hmm.
um, and the men in your family, we don't want them to exchange places. But I always thought, and I remember we had Bishop on here, and I
Hmm.
always say, why don't the men get together and talk to the men? We're always
Yeah.
and address them and make them go and apologize. Get together
Yeah.
and do something. But you know, everybody scatters away, Anthony and Broderick. All the men, they just seem to just scatter away. And then what
It's
do?
just
Here
him.
come the women. Yap, yap, yap. We'll talk about it. But why can't the guys go find this
Yeah.
person, deal with it, sit them down and say, look, we know this happened or whatever, and deal with it so the families can come back together and have restoration.
Yeah.
And then those of you, you were not there, so could you just shut up? You know, that's all I can tell you. You weren't there, so shut
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
You know, and people, I think about being a young girl. You think I'm not trying to be famous or a superstar. You think I want to tell somebody something about being raped and molested? I only do this on the strength of
Yeah.
the Lord. And it takes amazing
Yeah.
strength for you to show up here tonight and come here and help someone else. Another question I have for you is so much, and you know we can't do this before they put the note, our card up, and be like, y'all at 30 yet, 40 yet, 50. But I would like to just, there we go, there's the
Wow.
producers. I would like to say thank you once again and
Yeah.
thank all of you for buying books. But one thing you shared with me since
Yeah.
you've been here, and you said that one of the things you did, you went to therapy,
Hmm.
but there was a particular conversation
Hmm.
that you had while you were in group therapy,
Yeah.
and there were some police officers there.
Hmm.
Because a lot of the time, you know what bugs me? Even my friends, I love them. But why didn't you do this? Why don't people ever tell? You better be glad you
Why
don't
didn't you
know.
fight?
Why didn't you fight? Why didn't you scream? If so and so was upstairs or downstairs, why didn't you scream? But hey, I can give you that question back. Why didn't your mama tell us that you did such a thing? Because you did it before. Why didn't your daddy tell us? Why didn't your brother tell us? You know, we can reverse
Right.
this,
Right.
but I wouldn't even
Right.
put that on the mother or the sister or the
Yeah.
family. I'm not
Yeah.
going to put that because I know why women do that, because they're afraid, they're ashamed. They don't want their
Yeah.
sons to go to jail, or their daughters. There's
Right.
daughters that do this thing. But tell me what the officers told you about your survivor and your story, and everybody's story is different.
Yeah.
So I know that sometimes you ask why, because you don't know no better, because you wasn't there, because you didn't have that experience, because if you did, you wouldn't dare ask anybody
Yeah.
why it took me so long to write a book. You know how many, the name of my book was who could live through it? But then I was so embarrassed. I was so ashamed writing this book. I said, well, why should I be ashamed? And I'm very emotional now. I feel like crying. I'm kind of all over the place because this is my family. And this happened to my whole family. And to see the brokenness in my husbands and my sons that wanted to address an issue, but they could not, or they'll become a criminal, and we'll all be out of space. I'm gonna just leave it in outer space. I didn't tell you where we really gonna be, but anyway, I thank God for
Yeah.
prayer. I thank God for love.
Yeah.
You got to have love and not hate. And even in your failures, in someone else's failure, you still got to have a love for life. And I know some of you is like, I don't got no love. I'll kill a so and so if they touch a so and so. But that's not always the way out,
Yeah.
because we all would be in trouble. So Sheila,
Yeah.
you said that you were in therapy and some of the officers told you,
Yeah.
and they helped you a lot.
Yeah. So I basically shared my story and kind of like how I shared with you guys, kind of how I got out of the situation. I guess my response is more so, get out of there as soon as I can. And, I was expressing in therapy that I honestly felt weak. I felt like I should have done this or I could have done this. And hearing actual officers that had basically responded to different things where people had fought or people had maybe tried to maybe just run or whatever it is that people think that you should do or scream, they were like, that is the best thing that you could have done. And they were like, I wish somebody, they even said they, because a lot of them had daughters, they were like, man, I would be so proud of my daughter if she were to do that. And you should, speak out and tell people about that, because they were just like, I can't tell you how many times where we respond where somebody did fight and somebody's not here anymore, or somebody is a vegetable because they got hit with a bat, or all these different things. And, and then I started thinking, I'm like, that is right. This person was like 6 feet something, 200 something pounds. I don't know. He's already doing something that he shouldn't be doing. How would I ever know that he's not already in a state of
Mine
darkness
pulled a
where he
gun
could?
on me. I played dead. And I know I'm being humorous right now because this 40
Yeah.
years later. But honey, I laid
Yeah.
there and played dead. And then he said, "Oh, you're gonna play dead now."
Yeah.
Then he went and got the gun, and I don't know. It just didn't. The trigger didn't
Yeah.
pull. But
Yeah, and so they were just like, I mean, you're still here and you're able to do this now. Be thankful that you have this opportunity to have victory, because if you had a thought, that wouldn't have changed what happened. And so yeah, and so that was really refreshing to hear from people who had actual experience with the aftermath of where people had done things or tried to fight. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but I am saying when you do ask people, well, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? Like, you should be thankful that you're able, even standing in front of that person, able to ask that question, because they could have not been here if they had have done whatever it is that you think you would have done in that moment. And so I just thought that that was so huge and even key for even my personal healing, because I felt like, again, I was weak, or I should have done this, or people were saying, why didn't I scream for help, or all these different things. And again, it's like when somebody's already in this state of darkness, they could be capable of anything, and it was just cool to hear a police officer say that. So,
wow, well, thank God for the police officer. And I'm sure that's reassuring to you because we do question, it's how many years later? And I still question myself sometimes and people. And I always try to maintain a level of coolness when I meet people or I share my book and they be like, girl, my daddy would have. No, your daddy wouldn't have been there. Girl, my mama, no, your mama wasn't there. And so,
yeah.
it's easy to say a thing, and sometimes, like I said, people just say it out of conversation.
Even when they're talking about children, like a children's instinct is, I don't want to get in trouble. It's not, let me tell on this big person.
Hmm.
People expect children to do something that they're literally not prepared to do, or they'll take that into adulthood and live several decades of years thinking, well, why didn't I do this as a kid, or why didn't I tell? But as a kid, you were thinking, I don't want to be in trouble. That's your thoughts. I just want to go to school. You're not thinking about, no one's sitting you down preparing you for these things. So,
I just went silent the next day
yeah.
and went to school. But you said something, and I say this to a lot of guys this thing happened to, and even when it happened to their children or their daughter or themselves, they feel weaker.
Mhm.
Well, maybe it's all across the board the same weakness,
Yeah.
but because they're men, it's like
Yeah.
men don't want to say anything because
Yeah.
I feel weak. I know the men in my family felt weak because they
Yeah.
wasn't able to respond to
Yeah.
you in a combat kind of way, because men go straight to war. And that's why we got a lot of stuff going on now. I'm not saying that women don't want, women go to war too, but you've heard so many times in these kind of situations that men respond with
Vengeance.
with vengeance and killings and things like that. And we're not saying do that. I'm saying be strong, listen to your family, We are out here trying to survive. You're trying to survive. We want you to continue to listen, and hopefully something Sheila has said that's given you a new insight, because she's truly has given me a new insight, not to be embarrassed, because sometimes that state of mind comes to me that you were weak and why didn't you call? Why I always say, why didn't you run away? Would you have our final statements and tell survivors how they can survive and what's on the other side of surviving?
Um, like I said, it's restoration. It's being able to speak and being able to help somebody else. Because unfortunately, these things happen. And now, guess what? You don't get to say that you're not educated in that area. So.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Look at me going in again. But thank you so much, Sheila. This is my namesake, Sheila Jackson, and we are thankful for you. Make sure you order some books and tell your story to somebody in your own time. And it is the will of the Lord that you survive, and that there is beauty on the other side. And we have divine evidence tonight. Thank God for the victory. Thank God for peace of mind. Thank God for joy. And we'll see you next week. Make sure you tune in on Sunday morning with Pastor A. Allen Calvert, ministering our word at the Light Church. And we love you. You got a story of your own.